Hey, how's it going, everyone? I bet you're probably wondering, oh, Cameron, what are you doing? What are you doing? This still isn't any of the fan fictions that was on the poll, okay? Well, here's the thing, Jimbo. I ran another poll. So, trust me, all the fan fictions on the first poll are gonna be read eventually. All the things that were on it. So, I've just. You know what? No, I don't have an excuse. I've just been lazy. But, new Kirby game coming out today, and it's about love and friendship. So I figured I'd read a Kirby fan fiction, and it's a Kirby X DDD fan fiction that was voted on for 44%. So yeah, let's go. Author's note. One of my good friends, Stashy, has been feeling really down lately, so I thought I'd do something for her. Since I've been having trouble drawing for a while, I decided to make a fic for her, and it shall be a fic about her favorite pairing at that. Kirby X DDD. I'm not too experienced in writing for HNK, but I'll give it a try anyways. I hope all you Kirby fans out there enjoy this. Disclaimer, this is a series. This series, nor does its character belong to me in any way. If it belonged to me, there would be a lot more slash in it. Okay, see, we got a wholesome disclaimer, There's a serious lack of wholesome Kirby fan fiction that I've seen. It's all really bad. It's about vor. Apologies. Here we go. It was late in the dead of night when things took an odd turn between the Star Warrior and the Penguin King. DDD had ventured into the kitchen of the castle to fetch a midnight snack as per usual. The self-proclaimed king was digging through the fridge trying to find something that would suffice as a decent snack. To think, with all the money they had, they would at least have something good. Absolutely nothing looked appealing to him, which was evident by his actions, tossing the food over his shoulder. No! I'm going to be using the Kirby right back at you, DDD. Hold on, let me get into my character. I need a monster to clobber that there Kirby! There we go. Oh, I'm doing good. DDD mumbled, sleepily half awake, as his appetite had rather rudely startled him out of his sleep. He was having a very nice dream at the time, too, although he probably couldn't even remember what it was about. Probably something about Kirby. He had been thinking about that puffball an awful lot lately, to the point where it was driving him crazy. DDD knew he shouldn't be letting a mere child get to him this much, but he was so frustrating. No matter what sort of demon beasts he would send after him, Kirby would always manage to defeat every single one of them. Okay, so this seems to be in the Kirby right back at you universe. Alright. Escargoon, yep, Kirby right back at you universe. Alright, yep, I'm good with, yep, my voice prediction was good. Escargoon would remark that they never respected him in the first place, and DDD would give him a pounding for it, as always. But right now there was no snail for him to beat up. The only other way he vented his frustrations was by eating, of course. However, this was proving difficult to do so when there was nothing good to eat. Sighing, the penguin finally settles on some crackers after a fruitless search in the fridge. Crackers are good, okay? He was going to have to order Escargoon to buy some better food later today. Just as this thought crossed his mind, he heard a shuffling of feet echo through the castle. Curiosity getting the better of him, he turns around to determine the identity of the intruder. Who else could possibly be walking around in the castle this late at night? DDD considered the possibility of it being a ghost, but the last one had been a trick by Nightmare to get him to pay his bills. His confusion is finally appeased when he discovers that the one walking through his castle is Kirby. DDD scowls in dismay at the sight of the pink puffball. Just his luck. Leave it to Kirby to make his lousy evening even lousier. Although from the looks of it, Kirby seemed to be having a pretty lousy evening too. The pink puffball looked rather perturbed, which was uncommon for him. Kirby was usually always high in spirits, no matter what the situation. Unable to help himself, DDD finds himself chuckling nastily at the thought of the Star Warrior suffering. If anybody deserved to suffer, it was definitely Kirby. Kirby had been heading to the fridge to help himself a midnight snack too, when he heard the king snickering. He turns his gaze over to DDD forlornly, sighing when he notices that the penguin tries to pretend as if he hadn't been laughing at him. He shuffles around the fridge a bit more, selecting quite a few snacks from its shelves. His plate wasn't nearly as spoiled as DDD's, so a lot of it looked appealing. Arms full of tasty delights, the pink puffball takes a seat at the dining table, seeming to not care that the king is there. The truth was, Kirby never really disliked DDD in the first place, even in spite of how mean DDD was to him. He still wanted to be his friend, no matter how much older Kirby got. He was still in his young preteen years now. He continued to hope that their one-sided rivalry might change into a friendship instead. He didn't even understand what made the king hate him so much anyway. Kirby never remembered saying anything offensive to him when he first arrived to Popstar, and he couldn't even talk back then anyways. He knew that he knew it was going to take a lot to finally get DDD to like him. In fact, he sometimes wasn't even sure if that was possible. Coupled with the horrible nightmare he had, the idea of remaining enemies with DDD forever was enough to start making him cry. Alright, who made Kirby cry? That's against the law! Taken by surprise by the puffball suddenly starting to cry, DDD took a while to make sure that he was seeing was real. Was that little brat seriously crying? He didn't have anything to cry about. He had everything he wanted. Aside from that, he didn't even think it was possible for Kirby to cry. He hesitantly approaches Kirby as if he's a bomb set to go off any second, uncertain to what to say. Hey, what are you bawling your eyes out for? Cut that out, Zoe! His sobbing subsided for a bit. Kirby turns over to the annoyed penguin, rubbing his eyes. He finds it's extremely difficult to try and make decipherable words while he's crying. I would stop crying if I could. Oh God, how do I turn my Kirby voice into speaking? Okay, Hi. Oh God, can't hit that high note. All right, fine. I'll give Kirby a manly voice for comedy's sake. Comedy is dead, and we killed him. Anyway. I would stop crying if I could. Why does it bother you anyways, Poyo? Is that DDD's Japanese name? The puffball was just full of surprises today. Apparently for a moment, DDD wasn't sure how to respond to the question. Too flustered to say anything else. The penguin rudely exclaims, What kind of question is that? Of course I don't care about you. I only wanted you to shut up. Your crying is really annoying, Zoe. I don't know what that's about. Oops, that was the wrong thing to say. At the king's word, Kirby's immediately started crying even more. He was getting pretty loud, and it might manage to cause a real ruckus if it kept going. You're always so mean to me. Why do you hate me so much, Poyo? DDD had never even thought of the possibility that the Star Warrior didn't nearly hate him as much as he assumed he did. An unfamiliar feeling of guilt overwhelms him as he now understands this. Come to think of it, Kirby had never really held a grudge for him in spite of all the bad things he did. Was it really true that their rivalry was one-sided? It was all too much for him to ponder in the middle of the night, so he settles with a nasty response. Hey, you're wrong about that, Zoe. I don't hate you, okay? Just like that, the puffball's tears seem to stop flowing as his confusion takes him over instead. Though the words are hard to believe, it brings him incredible relief to hear them. Yes, that was what he wanted to know all along. However, there was the chance that DDD didn't really mean it, and he couldn't help being slightly skeptical. Really? Is that true, Poyo? Something about the look that the puffball is giving him causes a blush to rise in his cheeks as he promptly hides his face. What was that look supposed to be about? He wished Kirby wouldn't stare at him that way, since it really only frustrates him more. Yes, really, I wouldn't say something like that if I didn't mean it. That makes me happy to hear. After wiping his tears, Kirby gets up from the chair. Then he does something that throws DDD yet again. He pulls the Penguin King into a hug without any warning at all, with a big grin on his face. I always knew you weren't such a bad guy after all, Poyo. Kirby is Brendaniel now. Complete official Kirby lore. I got Star Allies early. That's a little bit of a spoiler for all you Jimbos out there who haven't played it yet. DDD almost jumps out of his skin in surprise at the sudden physical contact from his sworn enemy. What did the crazy puffball think he was doing? More embarrassed than ever, DDD is stuttering so much that he barely got a word out. He tries to push the pink warrior off of him, but to no avail. Kirby really was a lot stronger than he looked. Hey, just because I don't hate you doesn't mean you get to be all touchy-feely. I never said I could hug. Still giddy over the king's proclamation of no longer hating him, Kirby didn't notice DDD was trying to pry him loose. He only takes notes of this when he's practically yanked off and dropped onto the floor. Even he doesn't expect the giggle that comes out of him over the king's antics after getting back on his feet. That doesn't matter to me. I'm still happy since I got you to admit that you like me, Poyo. DDD was also confused by the puffball's giggling for a bit, but seemed to give him a strange look. Gosh, that kid could be such a girl sometimes. Wait. Gosh, that kid be such a girl sometimes. Okay, I guess that's a proper sentence. He was just as confusing as 1-2. Once the Star Warrior's words reached his ears, he's even more flustered than before. He can't stand that the little pink puffball always finds a way to get a reaction out of him. It ought to be the other way around, for once. Like you? Don't twist my words around. I just said I don't hate you. Not that I like you or anything, but baka. That last part wasn't there, but God, it hurt. I hurt my soul. But if you say that you don't hate me, then the only option left is for you to like me. What else could you have meant, Poyo? Kirby smirks mischievously as he said this, knowing that it was mean for him to mess with DDD so much. But it was so easy to get the king ruffled sometimes, he just couldn't help it. DDD opens his mouth to say something, and against that, when no words comes out, he closes it shut. Darn it, he really hated to admit it, but that stupid puffball had a really good point. Oh, how he wished to rip that smug smurf off the little brat's face. To add insult to injury, it was getting one-upped by a kid. He was a king. He shouldn't let a little snot-nosed child get under his skin so easily. Just to say something, anything to counter his response, he replies with, "Isn't it past bedtime for little brats like you? Go on, shoot, you overstayed your welcome." DDD inwardly smirks in triumph at how drastically the Star Warrior's smile crumples into a deflated frown. Score 1 for DDD, score 0 for Fat Zero Kirby. That's not what it said. I messed it up. Kirby shakes his head defiantly against the king's words, managing to annoy DDD all over again. No, I won't go back to sleep. What? DDD bellows, his temper getting the better of him. Kirby doesn't seem too fazed by it, unfortunately. Not that Kirby was ever easily frightened in the first place. But he probably saw this temper too often to react to it anymore. If anything, Kirby would probably be the only one worried about it if he was suddenly being kind and gentle. Why not? I already told you what you wanted to hear, and you stuffed your face with half the food in the fridge. A weary expression overtakes Kirby's expression, but not over the king's shouting. Whatever was making him worried seemed to have something to do with what was going on outside of the kitchen. This was made a little more evident by Kirby staring glumly at the hallway. He shakes his head no again, a little more firmly this time. I absolutely cannot go to bed, Poyo. Why not? DDD demands a second time, glaring close at Kirby's face this time. Maybe if he intimidated the puffball enough, that would make him get out of sight finally. Kirby takes a step back, but doesn't seem to be afraid at all. He had a determined look on his face that showed just how serious he was about this. He shakes his head no again, yet another time, crossing his arms together defiantly. The puffball's antics only reminded the king why he was never going to have kids. They were far too much trouble than they were worth. I can't go to sleep because of the monsters. Monsters? DDD repeats, confusion dominant over his previous anger for the umpteenth time tonight. Monsters, Kirby confirms, his determined expression never even slightly wavering. Seeing that his answer needed a bit more clarification for DDD, he explains a bit more. I had a nightmare about monsters. Well, demon beasts, actually. It was a fight against a really powerful one, and I thought I could beat him even though I hadn't trained in a while. Then, after a bit of silence, he adds a mumbled tone as if he's ashamed to admit it. I lost, Poyo. DDD blinks, mostly because he doesn't know what else to say. To this surprising revelation, he was having a tough time trying to wrap his head around the idea Kirby actually had doubts in his abilities. Kirby, the eternally optimistic and oftentimes very smug Star Warrior, actually had times where he worried that he wouldn't always win. Not only that, but Kirby had even had a nightmare about such a situation. DDD looked over him a bit to confirm that he was really Kirby and not some poorly replicated clone. No, everything about him was still the same as before, aside from the fact that he actually had the capability to fear things. Somehow, though, just understanding this brought his outlook on the young hero to a whole new light. It was something hard to remember. Kirby was just a kid with all the powers he had, but the fact that Kirby admitted to being afraid and the fact that he was refusing to go to bed after having a nightmare much the way a child would. DDD sighs in defeat as he grudgingly accepts that it would be pointless to get Kirby to respond by being aggressive. From the little he did know about children, he knew that they didn't like being bossed around. They especially didn't appreciate such behavior when they were already feeling terrible on their own. But it still stood that he couldn't let Kirby stay up all night either. The only problem is that he didn't know how to get him to go back to bed. Then he recalls a similar situation that occurred between him and Escargoon when he was a child. That's right! He just had to do whatever Escargoon did. He would usually be carried off to bed after being hummed a lullaby. DDD blanches at the idea of singing a lullaby to Kirby of all people. Okay, so maybe he would have to leave out that part for this circumstance, but he would do the part of taking him to his room. DDD turns his attention back to the defiant Puffball, trying to figure out how to go about this. Kirby was clearly very against the idea of going back to sleep, so this might take some work. He never backed down from a challenge. Anyway, he was all about making daring moves. After finally getting Kirby's attention, he said, I normally wouldn't do this, but this time I'll make an exception. Will you get your butt back in bed if I go there with you? In almost exactly a second, he says these words. Kirby's defiance is instantly forgotten as he overcome with joy. If you didn't know any better, DDD could assume Kirby put up with this whole act just to spend time with him. Seeming to be eager to comply with this idea, Kirby hoists himself up into DDD's arms, much to the king's chagrin. Okay, sounds good to me. Let's go, Poyo. Grumbling obscene curse words that Kirby will never understand, he makes his way to Parm and Mimu's room in the castle. He remembered hearing Fumu and Bun asking Kirby to stay over earlier, so at least he didn't have to walk very far since he hadn't gotten much sleep. DDD was yawning quite a bit on his way to Kirby's room and frequently found himself wishing someone could carry him instead. Maybe on his way back to his own bedroom he could order Escargoon to do that. That's actually funny, a joke. After what felt like a long time, DDD finally entered into Kirby's room, placing the puffball on his small bed. He was about to turn around and head to bed when Kirby tugs on his coat. This sends an irritated glare in Kirby's direction, wishing the puffball would leave him be. Finally, he had done what that stupid little kid had wanted, hadn't he? DDD couldn't imagine what else he could still want. Seeming to sense his confusion, Kirby gets off his bed and heads back further into the room. After some shuffling around, he comes back with a book in one arm. Looking expectantly at him, he holds up the book to the penguin. I can never get to sleep without a good story. Please, Poyo! No! DDD immediately answers, annoyed and surprised at the same time that Kirby was asking to read. How old was he again? In any case, DDD was certain that Kirby was too old to be asking for a bedtime story. He was determined to refuse Kirby's childish request. Oh, come on, Poyo. It would just be one story. I even got a really short one, too, so it won't take too long either, Poyo. Seeing that reasoning had not gotten the desired reaction out of the king, Kirby resorts to another tactic. He put on his best puppy dog face in hopes of swaying him into agreeing. DDD's expression is deadpan. He was immune to this tactic since he had practiced it when he was a kid far too many times. However, since it was clearly the only way to get Kirby to leave him alone, then all he could do was agree to it. Besides, it was just one story after all. Fine, but you better keep your promise of limiting it to only one story or else you're officially exiled, Kirby! Giggling mischievously, Kirby hands the book to the king and crawls into his bed, snuggling into the covers. He has an eager smile on his face and he waits for DDD to start reading. What are you waiting for, Poyo? Don't rush me, Zoy! DDD impatiently snaps at him, feeling that his patience was really being tested this evening. He grudgingly opens the book, discovering that the story isn't really that long. It at least had pictures in it too, so it wouldn't be completely boring. He checks the front cover of the book, finding that it's some stereotypical story about a princess. He passes Kirby an incredulous look, who merely shrugs, and then he turns back to his current task and sighs. Alright, let's see here. Once upon a time, there was a princess. She was the prettiest person in the whole kingdom. Hey, that sounds like someone I know. Me! Kirby rolls his eyes exasperately as DDD chuckles over his remark. He tosses one of the pillows in the king's face, effectively interrupting him. I want to hear a story, not hear about you bragging about your non-existent good looks. The penguin flings the pillow off his face, coughing out a few pillow feathers. He glares spitefully in Kirby's direction as he exclaims, Well, I didn't exactly agree to this on my own, so you better watch where you fire that ammunition. Satisfied, this seems to have shut up the Star Warrior for a while. He returns to the page of the story he was last on. So, that's where I was. She was the prettiest person in the whole kingdom, but she could not find a suitable man to marry her. They were either too mean or too old or too greedy, so she set off on a journey to find her one true love. As the story went on, DDD found himself yawning more and more, with his eyes getting droopy at a fast rate. Along with how little sleep he had gotten and how mundane the fairy tale was, he couldn't bring himself to stay awake. DDD was pretty sure that the puffball must be asleep by now. The kid didn't have the longest attention span in the world anyways. Maybe he could just rest his eyes for a tiny bit before heading back to his room. Within a few minutes, the Penguin King had ended up drifting off into dreamland most effortlessly. Excuse me, they already live in dreamland? Check your facts, Jimble. The book falls out of his hands and curls up on the foot of Kirby's bed snoring. The aforementioned Star Warrior walks over to pick up the book, not having fallen asleep as quickly as the king had. He had been feeling a bit tired himself now, though, so that at least DDD's efforts hadn't gone completely to waste. He smiles thankfully at the sleeping king and then leans over to leave a tiny kiss on DDD's forehead. The action only slightly stirred the king, but he was still in a deep sleep, muttering about puffballs being fruitcakes. Kirby quietly walks over to his bed and places the book on his nightstand and crawls into bed. He's just about to turn off the lights when he mutters in a quiet voice, "Good night, Poyode." Alright. I'm gonna give that an 8 out of 10. 8. Eight food items out of eight Penguin Kings out of 10. Okay, yeah, I haven't used the lunchtime with Smosh rating system in a while, have I? Oh man, yeah, it was wholesome. It was wholesome, and I can respect that. It's wholesome. So it gets the official Ultra Gamer stamp of wholesome, only awarded to one other story. Congratulations, Jimble. You did good. All 3K plus words. So yeah, that was good night. I don't have anything to say. You know, it's a Kirby X DDD fanfiction. You draw your own conclusions. Listen, man, I ain't gonna lie, but it's pretty gay. Just like your mom. Oh, and I just dated this video. Thanks for listening. Go play Kirby Star Allies. Or don't. I don't run your life.